Welcome to Robert Pear's Photography. This is Robert Pears. I just want to give a brief training, taking you through the basics of how we work, so you understand when we're shooting wedding or specialty event photography, the modes, terms, and how we work using our DSLRs. Typically, as I said, in a wedding or specialty event, we will shoot in RAW format, and I'm going to explain that much later. When we are using flash, we'll use manual mode, but I will also allow creative mode for those in training. For non-flash situations, we will use AV mode or aperture mode. Explaining that, see a creative mode. When you're training, you have to learn to trust the camera, let the camera take a shot, look at the settings that it used, and then use the knowledge that you gain to begin to modify those settings to gain more creative pictures. Okay, so let's start. What is the aperture? I refer to the aperture mode AF. So what is the aperture? When you look at a camera, you look at the lens, you will see an F number, which is referred to as the f-stop. For example, you'll see a lot of lenses f1.4, 4.5, 5.6, etc. And this is the size of the lens opening, or the aperture. So we'll refer to the f-stop or the aperture, which is the size of the lens opening, which is how much light is allowed through the lens to get to the sensor. With every increase in f-stop, you reduce the amount of light by half. So if I go from an f1.2 to 2.8, I reduce the amount of light by half. Okay, so a smaller f-stop, 1.4, allows more light through it compared to a larger f-stop, such as 2.8, going all the way up to f22 and even higher depending on the lens. Now, we typically want to use a lower f-stop, ideally a 2.8 or lower, in low light situations such as weddings or specialty events. Now when you look at the larger lenses, the zoom lenses, say a 400mm, to get a zoom lens 400mm with a f-stop of 4, you'll probably pay around $6,000. To get to a 2.8, you're going to pay like $12,000. So you pay a lot more money for a lower f-stop, because they, again, every time you add more glass in a lens, you are reducing the amount of light, so it becomes more and more difficult to get more light through it. So why do we need larger f-stops? Well, we'll talk a little about focus in a little bit later. The smaller the f-stop, the smaller the zone that is in focus. Okay, and again, I'm going to explain that a little bit in a minute. Okay, if we take a portrait with an f1.4, we end up with just a small amount in focus. So let's say we want the eyes in focus and the rest not. So using an f1.4 can give us a very desirable effect. The higher the f-stop, the more we get in focus. So as you continue to increase that f-stop, you're going to get more and more in focus, but you pay off by losing light. And anybody's ever done the pinhole camera, they know that theoretically you're getting everything in focus, but again, it's a pinhole, so not a lot of light's getting in. So there's a balance that we need to obtain between getting the enough in focus and getting enough light through the lens. So we also need to be aware that by changing the f-stop, it will change the shutter speed, or how fast the camera takes a photograph. If less light is getting into the camera, it's going to need to take a longer exposure to get enough light to get a good exposure on a picture. Another thing to be aware of on full frame cameras, something I'll explain later, like a lot of the cameras we use, the 5Ds, they will, with wide angle lenses, again something I'll explain later, need a higher f-stop, otherwise you'll get vignetting, or darkening around the edges. You're also going to hear the term fast lens, and a fast lens refers to a lens with a low f-stop. So if you can imagine, if I got a 400mm lens with an f2.8, it's going to take a photograph much faster than a 400mm with an f 4.5 or 5.6. So we refer to it as a fast lens. Be careful. So in other words, if we play around in low light with f lenses that have, a lens with an f 2.8 or lower, we can capture more light and really be more successful in low light situations, or in sports photography where we may have to take fast pictures in low light. If we change the f-stop in AV mode, the camera will automatically change the shutter speed to correct for that. So be aware of that. That's why when we're using flashlight, I will use the M so that I can control the f-stop and control the speed, and I'll explain that more later. Okay, depth of focus. What is depth of focus? Okay, As I explained, depth of focus is impacted by the f-stop, and being able to control that f-stop and control that depth of focus enables us to be able to blur out the background. We can remove distractions, things in the background, for example, people. We want the person in focus and we want the people are in the background to be blurred out. We control the f-stop, we control the depth of focus. But if we're taking a landscape or a group of people, we want as much in focus, so we want a larger f-stop. So again, we have to play around with that balance to try and get the correct amount in focus and enable enough light to get a good picture. So the next thing we're going to look at is shutter speed. As I said, you play around that f-stop, it's going to impact the shutter speed, how fast the camera takes a picture. The more light that gets in, the camera can take a faster picture. The less light, it's going to need a longer picture. A good rule of thumb in how fast the shutter speed should be is to look at the focal length or the size of the lens. So if you have a 200mm zoom lens, for example, then you would want 1/200, okay, or 1 over the focal length. So if you have a 50mm length lens, then you want 1/50. If you have a 400mm zoom lens, then you want 1/400. Hopefully you get the drift. If the speed is too slow, then you're going to begin to start seeing handshake, or you'll see like a fuzz appearing around the picture, which is obviously going to destroy the picture. As you increase the f-stop, the higher it goes, you will need to slow down the shutter speed to allow more light into the camera. With slow shutter speeds of less than 1/100th of a second, typically you will need a tripod, or again, following the rule of I just told you about 1 over the focal length. You will need to use some kind of support device, such as a tripod, otherwise you're going to get blurry. With slower shutter speeds, you will also lose any fast action, such as in sports. You will begin to see a blurring of the hands or of the foot, say in soccer, kicking the ball. Sometimes you want a slower shutter speed, and you can create slower shutter speeds by using ND filters, again something we'll talk about later. A good example may be you're taking a picture of downtown Chicago and you have a whole lot of people and you want to blur the people out but get the buildings. Shutter speed and flash. Cameras have a certain flash sync speed, how fast they will go, and that's important to know. It's usually around 1/200th of a second, it may get up to 1/300th of a second. If you go faster than that, you are going to see one of the curtains of the shutters and it's going to destroy the picture. So there's only so fast you can go. If I shoot at that sync speed of 1/200th of a second, all I'm going to get is the flashlight and I'm going to lose the ambient light. One of the things important to us is that we capture not just the flash but ambient. I want the photograph to look natural and the flash to be just highlighting, getting rid of shadows, so it looks like you're there and the flash is not not taking over the picture, but we're really feeling like we were there. I don't want high bright areas on their foreheads, etc., harsh shadows. So we will try to slow down that speed, because again, if you slow down that speed, you're going to get more ambient light. So when we are doing weddings, I will use manual mode because I can now control not just the aperture but also the speed of the exposure. I do not want harsh shadows. I don't want blown out highlights from a flash. I want to look natural, so I want to reduce the flash speed, and that becomes an art, because if I take it too slow, I'm going to get blurring and I'm going to get fuzz. If I take it too fast, all I see is the flash. So we start to play around, and again, that's where we take some trial shots. We come early, we take some shots, and we gain through experience, and we start to run, say, 100, 120, 160. We play around with speeds. And that we can do and try to get a more natural picture. It also might surprise you, on bright sunny days when we're outside taking pictures of people, we're going to use flash as well, because sun is very harsh, particularly at certain times of the day, and I want to remove those harsh shadows and blown out highlights that the sun creates. And so I'm going to actually underexpose the picture a little bit and then add some flash to really brighten up the areas where there were shadows and get a more pleasing picture. The other way to do it would be to use reflectors, but a lot of times people find the reflectors hurt the eyes, so we'll use some fill flash. So I just want to quickly continue here on overview of lighting, and we'll talk more about it in another section. The goal is to get a picture that looks well balanced, that we don't have harsh shadows. You don't see a big shadow on the wall, shadow under the neck. We don't see highlighted areas in the forehead and it just looks overexposed. I want it to look very natural, and so we want to balance how much light we're getting in, balance the aperture so that we got the right areas in focus. I want the eyes in focus, I want the main subject in focus, but I don't want to have that depth of focus so big that it takes such a long photograph that I lose an image. So we want to carefully control light and carefully control the time. I will continue on the next part in part B. Thank you.